Hello, welcome to the webinar with the Washington Native Plant Society. I'm here today with Don Hardin, and Don is going to present on the common wildflowers of the eastern region of the Sextorphia chapter in southwest Washington. Don Hardin was born in Los Angeles, California. His childhood and high school years were spent in San Diego and in northern Florida. He spent much of his boyhood years roaming the sage and rabbit brush hills of San Diego and the pine woods of Florida, chasing toads, butterflies, possums, coons, searching for snakes, developing a love and respect for nature. He learned which grasses to chew, treasured the rare sassafras root with its licorice flavor, and feasted on blackberries, wild persimmons, and grapes. He moved to and immediately fell in love with the Northwest in 1965. Professionally, Don entered nursing, becoming the first male public nurse in Multnomah County. He returned to school, obtaining his master's degree in nursing and becoming the fifth nurse practitioner in the state of Oregon. Hired by the National Health Services Corps, he began practice in Halfway, Oregon, as the only health professional for 55 miles. He loved his work, the people, and the wild, rugged country in which he lived. Eventually, he moved to Tacoma and Olympia area until returning from nursing. Making a total career change, he became the Natchez district manager for Northwest Land Management, a company that had a contract with the U.S. Forest Service to manage campgrounds. The Natchez Ranger District is one of the most rugged and wild areas in the Northwest. One of the perks with roaming nearby ridges rich with wildflowers. And that is where the wildflower bug bit him, a bug that has never stopped biting. On moving to White Salmon, Washington, he became part of a group interested in revising the Sextorphia chapter of the Washington Native Plant Society. The chapter had no officers nor contact person, and the state WMPS had served notice: shape up or get certified. Don recalls, "We just did not feel letting the chapter die was the right legacy for Wilhelm Sextorph, the famous Belgian botanist the chapter was named after." He became president. Others stepped to the plate for the other needed officers. With hikes as the key focus, the chapter grew slowly over the next 5 years. Dan Richardson started a newsletter. The chapter began to sponsor a few programs, which rapidly gained in popularity. Membership grew. In 2018, thanks to All Hands on Deck, the chapter sponsored the WMPS Study Weekend in the Hood River and Benton area. The weekend broke records for both the number of hikes offered and the number of attendees. Meanwhile, personally, Don took advantage of every learning experience about wildflowers he could. Books, magazines, thank you to Glossia, workshops, field activities, Botany Washington, and Rare Care. He became a master gardener. After 5 years, he happily passed the chapter presidency on to other very competent hands, the current president being Sue Cush. He remained active as a member at large for both WMPS and the Sextorphia chapter. Currently, he serves as a director at large on the WMPS State Board of Directors. Meanwhile, he continues to hike actively, often taking 200 or more wildflower photos per day, always and eternally seeking that ultimate perfect wildflower photo, the sublime desire of most wildflower lovers. It is my pleasure to welcome Don Hardin and his presentation on the wildflowers of his region. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Denise, and welcome to all of you who are joining us here on this beautiful sunny day. Thanks for being indoors to watch this webinar when the sunshine outside is beckoning to you so strongly. We're going to be talking today about the common wildflowers found in the eastern half of the Suxdorfia chapter geographical area. So just where is that? Suxdorfia chapter is long and narrow. It's one county wide, stretching along the Columbia River, clear from mid-state for 200 miles all the way to the coast. We can't cover all the wildflowers in that area today, so we're going to concentrate on some selected hikes in 3 counties. Clark County, Skamania County, and Klickitat County. It should be noted that obviously these are not discrete populations of wildflowers, but are contiguous with the wildflower community that recognizes no state boundaries, nor even the broad Columbia River. However, there are some unique factors to these wildflowers, and some that grow better here than in other places, even just across the river. What wildflowers grow where is mitigated by many factors, including soil, but perhaps the 2 most common factors are moisture and elevation. And that's where we get a lot of diversity for the chapter, because there are huge amounts of differences in the amount of precipitation. Some of the highest variability in the state. It's all the way from very heavy rainfall just inland of the coast and along the eastern mountains of Clark and Skamania, here and here, all the way over to the dry desert-like conditions, eastern Klickitat County here. The elevations too vary tremendously. Obviously, you got some of it clear out here at sea level on the coast, but even inland, all the way up at Benjamin, the elevation is only 80 feet at the Columbia River level, while just 33 miles to the north, it's 8,900 feet on the west side of Mount Adams up here, where the Skamania County eastern border is. These 2 factors play important roles in creating one of the most diverse variety of wildflowers to be found anywhere in Washington state, and perhaps anywhere in the United States. So let's hit the trail. So where are some good Suxdorfia chapter wildflower hikes? Well, we can't cover them all by any means, but we're going to cover just a few, with a few flowers from each of those. Wish we could cover even more. So let's start over in Clark County on the western edge of where we're talking about today at Lacamas Lake. We'll go over to Skamania County to Cape Horn, then on to Klickitat County, where we'll touch on the Weldon, Wagon Road, Conboy Lake, Coyote Wall, Catherine Creek, Major Creek, Dallas Mountain, and Brooks Memorial. I think this will give us a good taste of the overall diversity of the wildflowers that are seen within our district. Note all of these hikes are easily accessible, they're not too strenuous, and they're all on public land. So early in the season, what are we going to see first? Well, there are 2 particularly early seasonal flowers. One, of course, is the grass widows. Grass widows can usually be found on New Year's Day, particularly at Catherine Creek, if you know where to look. Another one that is also usually found very early in the year, often at New Year's, is the salt and pepper Lomatium gormani, which is located at Horsty Butte. A close variety is also found in Catherine Creek and usually comes out either by New Year's or a few days thereafter. So let's head west again and start over on the western edge of the area we're talking about today at Lacamas and Brown Lakes in Camas, Washington. These are best in April. They have easy multiple trails. The elevation at lake level is about 174 feet. As you enter the park, the first thing you'll probably be greeted with is a bunch of ferns, like these sword ferns. Another fern that we find a lot of there is the bracken fern. But the famous flower that Lacamas Lake is particularly noted for is the camas lily, the blue camas lily or common camas. That's the favorite flower of many of the people in the chapter, including our president, Van Bobbitt, who grew up in Camas, Washington, very nearby. Now, the camas lily is sort of the universal Suchsdorfia area wildflower also, in that any of the trails that I mentioned, you're going to find some camas lily on all of them, some more so than others. That goes all the way from Lacamas clear to Bickleton and from Dallasport up to Sadis Pass. That's misspelled, I'm sorry. Camas was also one of the favorite flowers of Russ Jolly, who wrote the book about wildflowers of the Columbia Gorge. Hopefully soon, I hear they may be coming out with an update with new pictures. It was also an important food staple for indigenous people, particularly onion-like bulb, and they still use it as a trade item even today. The problem is you can easily distinguish the blue camas lily from another lily, but you cannot as easily distinguish the bulbs, which is primarily what they harvested. And as a result, it can be confused with the white death camas, which is toxic. Here we have all three different camas lilies in this picture. There's the common camas, the meadow death camas just to the left of that over here. And there is a panicle death camas, two of them here and here, as well as this close-up right here. Easy to tell the difference in the flower, not so easy to tell the difference in the bulb. Another favorite among chapter members is often the Trillium obatum or western wake robin, distinguished by its beautiful, large, symmetrical leaves and its three colorful flower petals. The petals start out as white, and as they get more mature, they turn into this dark maroon color. Oh, what do we have here? Avalanche lilies at Lacamas Lake at this elevation? Well, we better look again. And when we do, we find on the leaves these brown mottled areas which distinguish it from the avalanche lily. This is what we call the fawn lily, or Thronium oregonum. Some of you may be better at Latin than I am, maybe have a slight pronunciation, but it's a dead language. There really is no absolute correct interpretation anyway. Now we're going to slip on over to Cape Horn, as time is flying on. It is the most wet hike of any of the hikes in the area. It's 5.2 miles, moderate hike with a pretty good elevation gain of 1,185 feet up to the level of the Nancy Russell Overlook. It's best hiked in June and July. That is, if it is not pouring. And that is the nightmare that makes scheduling this hike very, very difficult. Another wildflower found up here on Cape Horn is the Digitalis purpura foxglove. It's not native. It was introduced from Europe as a horticultural flower, but there's a problem with it. Originally, it was used as a plant source for the heart medication Digitalis. Well, since it's so good for that, it also happens to be toxic if ingested by humans or animals. And if you eat too much of it, it can kill you. So for this reason, it's not a very good choice for a yard ornamental, especially if their kids are around or even animals. Another plant that is edible that grows here is this, what we call sweet cicely. And if you pick these seed pods off of it right here and chew them a little bit, they have a nice sweet licorice-like flavor that is very pleasant and refreshing. This occurs on many of the trails, whereas the foxglove, I haven't seen it much of any place else besides here at Cape Horn or otherwise in Klickitat County. Well, there's a lot of ferns up here too on Cape Horn. We have 3 different ferns here in this one slide. First of all, there's the bracken fern. Then down here, we've got maiden fern, my favorite fern. Maiden hair fern, I should say. And then we also have the sword fern. This flower is known as the piggyback flower, or I like the other common name better. It's also called bronze bells, which is very characteristic of it. And indeed, in the wild, sometimes if the sun is hitting its right, these flowers can look quite bronze. I'm not able to identify for sure which mitrewort species this is, but it was growing right alongside the bronze bells. This interesting flower is just what it looks like. Looks like somebody grabbed the flower and turned its pants inside out. So we call it the inside out flower, or Vancouvera exandra. There are quite a few of the salmon berries up here, Rubus spectabilis. It has this nice edible berry on it. It can be either the salmon color or also more red. Another conspicuous flower up here on the Cape Horn Trail is what we call cow parsnips. And there's so much moisture up here that these things grow absolutely huge, much taller than a person, gigantic proportions. Now this was an interesting flower. Now this looks absolutely pretty. Wouldn't you like to have this in your yard with these pretty red berries? Well, think again. It's very easy to get tangled up in the thicket of these things, and it is the horrible devil's club. In fact, scientifically, they even named it Oplopanix horridus. Very well named. If you do get into the thicket, you're going to get scratched up and come out bleeding before you can get out of it. I will guarantee you. And fortunately, while it grows through much of western Washington, within the chapter, it only grows in Skamania County. And those of us that live a little further east are quite happy to have Skamania County keep them. Well, after a steady climb, we finally reached the summit where the trail is of the trail. We have stunning views up and down the Columbia River far below. The look of the trail is reached. You got stunning views up and down the river. Then you plunge straight over the edge to the forest deep below, and with views of Oregon sunshine and splashes of Oregon paintbrush. Here's Hooker's Ferry Bell. Another one that's up close to the Nancy Russell Lookout is this checker mallow. I've only observed that on one other trail recently. So I guess that can't quite be called a common wildflower. Here's the Nancy Russell overlook itself. If we go west of the lookout, we run into this Delphinium trolifolium, or cow poison, or poison larkspur are the common names. Actually, all larkspurs are reportedly toxic. They can cause skin irritation, or if you ingest them, can cause death for both humans and animals. These start just beyond the overlook, and they continue pretty thickly. There's a lot of them all the way back down to Highway 14, going out the Western Trail exit. There's also a mix of blooming hearts that go along with it. Well, time's running along, and so we're going to leave Cape Horn, and we're going to go over to Weldon Wagon Road in Klickitat County. It's best in early May. It's a little more difficult hike. It goes all the way, it's a 7-mile round trip in and out, and it's got a 1,200-foot elevation cane up to its high point at 1,900 feet. Pretty much steady all the way up. But the views are well worth the effort. Down at the bottom of the trail, I find perhaps my favorite flower, the little lady slipper or fairy slipper orchids, or lady slipper, I've also heard them called. Another orchid that grows here is the Corolla stricta, or the striped coral root. It's another member of the orchid family. And then we got these woodland strawberries, Frigeria vesca. They are edible and quite tasty if you can get them before the critters get to them. This one is called Hound's Tongue, or Cynoglossum grande. It is a native plant. There is another hound's tongue that is not native and is very invasive, and it has a high priority for eradication. I'm sorry I don't have a photo of that. This little flower is very easy to miss down at your feet. It's kind of very common on a lot of the trails. Uh, by the way, the house tongue is also found on a lot of the trails. It has a very pale blue flowers and a yellow center. You almost have to have a magnifying glass or loop in order to see them. Another, they're up here on the Weldon Wagon Road. There are a lot of species of the balsam root. The predominant one being the Puget Sound balsam root, or deltoideae. There are several balsam roots right here, or lobmatiums they're called. Can't quite make up my mind in looking at this one whether it's actually Tritornatum or Suchsdorf's desert parsley. Both are found up here, along with bare stem nudicale. This is kind of an interesting one. It's not a very pretty flower and sort of plain, but if you happen to crush it just a little bit, it has a bit of a lemon scent to it. It also can be a pesky garden weed, as I found out from experience. Moving on, we're going to go up now a little higher up to Conboy Lake. We'll go back just 1 second so people can see that. It's got a 3-mile easy loop trail. It's almost flat. The elevation is 1,820 feet. Again, too, it is best in May and June. They call it a lake, but you don't see any lake. But it is wet. And if you walk out across this, which you're not supposed to do, by the way, you'll get your feet wet, all right. There's water pretty much there. It actually belongs to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they maintain it and control the water level for the purpose of wildlife sanctuary for elk and deer, and most importantly, for migrating birds, particularly the whooping crane. You can hear them during the spring out there calling to you from the marsh, and occasionally you might even get to see one. This flower is found in fair amount of abundance there, as it is on many of our other trails. It's called baby stars. It used to be Linanthus bicolor, but they've changed it now to siphon bicolor. Another flower is the Nuka rose. It has some kind of nasty prickles on it. There's another one of my favorites, Aquilisa formosa or columbine. There's quite a few of them along the trail here, as in other places. This is another coral root, but instead of being striped, this one is what we call the spotted coral root. Another member, is a member of the orchid family. And then another member of the orchid family, this one is a little less common. You do find it other places. Particularly, there was a quantity up on Dog Mountain. This is called phantom orchid. This is a very delicate orchid. It's subject to easy destruction from trampling around it or messing with it. It doesn't like it. And I'm told that it takes 7 years for a coral root to grow to maturity. Or, excuse me, a phantom orchid to grow to maturity. This is an interesting flower. It's called Orobonca uniflora. It does not have any leaves of its own. The common name is naked broom rape. And there's all kinds of tales that go with that first part of the name, as you can imagine. Since it doesn't have any leaves of its own, it depends for chlorophyll on other plants which it parasitizes. And it can wipe out whole populations of whatever flower they're parasitizing on, although I understand more recent research is indicating that maybe that is not quite entirely true. Here's another view from Conboy Lake of Mount Adams there in the distance. But we're going to move on again. This time is running on also. We're going to go to Syncline, down to the south of that, close to the river level. It has multiple trails with glassy plateaus. It is very heavily used. In fact, it's becoming overused as a place for bikers in particular like this. And on weekends, you might have a little trouble competing with the bikes. It starts just above the river with some trails rising clear up to the 1,200 feet level, which makes for an interesting spread of different wildflowers. Watch out, though, for the poison oaks because it's plentiful up here. I'm going to pause here for just 1 second and check in with Elizabeth and Denise. Are we going okay?
Hi, Don. Things are going great. I don't see questions yet, so you can carry forward. You doing all right?
Good.
Excellent. Thank you.
This is a view from Syncline, looking down the river out over the wildflower area, meadows. One of the flowers that we find here, as you approach Syncline, there's some impressive walls of basalt on the left-hand side, and growing right down in this are a number of wildflowers, including this monkey flower, chickweed monkey flower. Now, how can you tell it's chickweed monkey flower? Well, one of the things you look for is the red dot on the lower lip. Another wildflower here among the rocks at the base is the henbit or red dead nettle, Lamium puerperum. And here's another wildflower, invasive species. Oh, wait a minute, no, that's Ron Plump. He's our chapter hike leader, and he's a pretty nice guy. But he's looking at some miner's lettuce. And this particular miner's lettuce happens to be the Claytonia. There is another miner's lettuce more to the west, which has a little different shape to the leaf. It's known as Siberian miner's lettuce. This is called rosy plectritis, and it also is frequent on many of the trails. Here's another monkey flower that we found there and is also frequent elsewhere. This one's a different one. It's called Seep Spring monkey flower, or Ranthri gutata. Used to be considered mimulus, but they've changed the name on it now. The difference is it has the red dots on the lower lip, but it also has similar dots deep in the throat, or smaller dots deep in the throat. This is a waterfall that's quite spectacular up there on the tree. So let's stop and think now. What did the bee say to the wildflower? Just a little humor to break in there. Okay, continuing on, we're going to go over to Catherine Creek now, which is just a little ways east of Syncline, but it's quite different in terms of the amount of the kind of wildflowers it has. The photos chosen this were from 19 hikes over a 13-year period. This is what we call the famous Catherine Creek Natural Arch. This is considered a sacred area to Native Americans, and they respectfully request that you do not go into the arch area for multiple reasons. One, it's a good place for snakes. Two, it's not very safe, and it's just not being respectful of their sacred land, and so it is fenced off. Catherine Creek and Dog Mountain are two hikes that have become way too popular. It's nearly impossible parking there on weekends, and the trails are crowded. As we mentioned, Olicinium douglasii is the first one found here. And a particular feature of Catherine Creek is what we call these vernal pools. Oh, by the way, the grass widows are not lilies, even though they look like a lily flower, but they're irises. And this is important because the Catherine Creek area in particular was very heavily grazed by sheep and cattle in the past. It was way overgrazed and killed off many of the wildflowers, including most of the balsam root. But the irises are toxic to livestock, and so they learned not to eat them. And so they left them alone and to leave us a nice show of them here at Catherine Creek. These vernal pools help to keep the wildflowers going for a little bit longer, and we need wildflowers. The soil here, by the way, at Catherine Creek is very shallow, thanks to the Missoula Club floods. It scooped off most of the topsoil and dumped it downriver. So what happened is, instead of having much of the forest that we have elsewhere, we have this wonderful wildflower habitat with this shallow soil. The stars of the show are what we call gold stars, or Quercidia multicolony, and then rocket stars. And these are both quite plentiful here, as they are on many of the other trails. These gold stars are so plentiful that they turn whole sides of the hillside yellow at many times, both here and over at Crawford Oaks. And another particularly showy flower is this Columbia Desert Parsley, or Lomatium columbianum. It has this deep maroon flower. It is endemic to the Gorge, one of 9 endemic flowers. It does grow a little bit up in the Yakima area, I understand, but by and large, it's confined to growth here in the Columbia Gorge. Another common one is this one we call Micranthus occidentalis. It's a saxifrage. This one we call the western saxifrage. There's another saxifrage here, also called integrifolia, or northwestern saxifrage. Well, how do you know the difference? Well, I I think of it this way. If you look carefully at the toothed leaf edges here, they're quite toothed on the western, on the northwestern, excuse me, the western saxifrage, was it because they're kind of rough characters, but the northwestern saxifrage, we're kind of smooth characters, and so we have nice smooth edges on our leaves. Early spring also brings a lot of yellow bells scattered around. This one you don't find quite so much of at Catherine Creek on the lower elevation, but as you get up higher, you see this Castanea hispida, or harsh paintbrush. This one is not quite as common. You have to know where to go to look for this one, but this is the glacier lily. How can you tell its difference? How does it? It's similar to avalanche lilies, but if you just think glacier lily, gee, gold. So they're yellow. We got some I think probably broadleaf lupin here, along with the balsam root. This is mainly in the upper areas. Barbara Robinson has been doing a great job of trying to get the balsam root growing back here. She's taken several of us out a few times, and we would go along and we'd look for gopher holes. And where the gophers had made a mound of dirt, that told us that the soil there was deep enough for the balsam root to grow. And so we would take seeds that Barbara had collected and poke them down into the moist dirt, loose dirt of the gopher hole. Well, the summer moves on and other species begin to bloom. This is the Barrett's penstemon barreata. Another one we find now is what we call the Phallosogosceras, or Nothocolis troxamoides. This is a lovely flower of later summer. It's called ukao. Well, how can you remember the name? Just think of it this way. There was a little boy that was out with his mother, and they were looking at wildflowers, and the mother kept trying to show this her little boy this beautiful flower, and instead he kept looking behind him, and he kept looking at some nearby grazing cattle, and he said, "Ooh, cow." This lovely flower becomes this as it matures. It's bitterroot, discovered by Lewis and Clark as we were passing through here, and it's called Luisia rediviva, after Lewis. Another one we'll find with the mature summer is the Centaurea sinus, or bachelor buttons. And this is the very spectacular Catherine Creek waterfall. We can't leave Catherine Creek without mentioning one other flower that's all over the place here. It is the Lomatium grayi, or pungent desert parsley. Supposedly, it was allegedly named by Asa Gray, who was the, although that claim is somewhat disputed, some say that others found it earlier than Gray did. He was the head of the Harvard botany program, and he was also the mentor to Wilhelm Suchstorp, whom our chapter is named after. Now, how can you be sure that this is pungent desert parsley? Well, it's pretty easy. You just pick off a small bit of leaf, crush it a little bit, take a whiff, but not too big a whiff, or you'll be sneezing all day. Has quite a strong odor. It's not entirely unpleasant, but it is strong. In fact, I don't even have to crush it. Even when I'm walking through this stuff, I can smell it. We're going to go on over to Major Creek now, just another mile over to the east. This is a little known hike, while Catherine Creek is just overthrown. I hardly see anybody on this hike. It's approximately 3 miles long, and you walk in and out along a little used county dead-end gravel road. There's a short 200-foot climb right at the beginning, then it's mostly level. Important, the adjacent land is posted Yakima Nation land, and please respectfully stay right on the roadway. You'll see plenty of wildflowers, no problem. This one called Senecio integrimus, I have a hard time getting my tongue around this one, or the white western groundsel. There's shooting stars there. There were also a lot of shooting stars over at Catherine Creek during season. Or poet's shooting star. This is another common flower, but it's particularly prolific here at Major Creek. It's what we call the Pacific popcorn flower. And you get so much of it here, it can turn whole areas of the hillside, just paint a white swath across there. Allegedly, it got its name because somebody thought it looked like somebody had just taken a bowl full of popcorn and thrown it out across the landscape. This little flower is called lupinus bicolor, or bicolor lupin, or midget lupin. It gets maybe 7 or 8 inches tall. This particular one looks like it's about the height of a pine needle, which isn't very much. Well, which lupin is this one? Most experts agree that identification of lupins is very tough. They look very much alike in the leaflets and the flowers. They're mostly blue, lavender, and purple. And even in the same species, the color of the flower can vary. There's very little variation in habitat, leaves, or the flowers themselves. And it's almost impossible to identify them from photos alone accurately. And this is partly because some of the key characteristics for identification are minute and often hidden inside the flower itself. So which lupin is this? I don't know. This one is what we call lithophragma. But which prairie star is it? It's prairie star. There's a couple kinds that there's a lot of. The two most common are lithophragma glabra, or the bulbous prairie star, or this one, the parviflora. And what you do is you look for clefts in the petal, and usually there are 3, and that throws it to parviflora. Just about right now, we start seeing these white patches on the hillsides along 14 and along the trails of what we call serviceberry, or I'm not going to even try to pronounce this one. It has this beautiful white flower on it. This, by contrast, that one's a pretty big one, but this one is quite small. It is characterized by this little white flower, and it looks like it's got 10 petals to it, but if you look closely, it actually only has 5, but they're not so deeply. It looks like 10 petals, and this is what we call field chickweed. Another small flower that is very, very common, and we see a lot of, is this small flowered blue-eyed Mary. And this one is not quite so. It's Clarkia gracilis, or slender Clarkia. We're going to leave Major Creek and move on to the Dalles Mountain. It's got multiple trails on it again. The Dalles Mountain Ranch Trailhead is at 1,300 feet, and one of the trails goes from here clear almost all the way back down to the river level at Crawford Oaks. Another one goes up to Stacker Butte above the Dalles Mountain Ranch to an elevation 3,230 feet. It's a little more of a tough hike. Or you can stay in your car and drive all the way up to the summit of Dalles Mountain Road at 2,381 feet. A state pass is required for the trails and the parking, except up at the summit of Dalles Mountain Road. That is not state park area. One of the flowers you'll see along the road on the way in is this Mara oregana, or manroot. It's called, some call it manroot because it has a taproot on it that is as large as a man's thigh, but the other popular name is called wild cucumber because it does have an inedible, bitter, round green fruit that looks kind of like a cucumber, except it's round instead of long. One portion of the state park is set aside as a research area for the study of the effects of intense grazing on wildflowers after the seeds dropped in the fall. Washington Native Plant Society did fund a research grant to help with this project. Bob Hansen is seen leading a group here up onto it. The researchers claim that it proves that if you graze off some of the foliage, that actually improves the wildflower habitat. When I look at the area just visually, I find that not particularly remarkable. I can't really tell the difference from farther away over areas that you'll see in a moment like this that are not controlled and where the wildflowers are doing just dandy. This is balsamroot and several species of lupin. The balsamroot and the lupin create huge patches of yellow and blue. These are visible from 20 miles or more away. The most common balsamroot up here is the deltoideae, or the Puget Sound balsamroot, but there are also other varieties. I'm not going to tell you exactly where this one is on Dalles Mountain, just that it's here, because this is the Dalles Mountain buttercup, which is an endangered buttercup. This one, though, is more common. It's Yakima milk vetch or one of the astragalus. If you go, do take the hike up to Stacker Butte, you'll come across these harsh paintbrush or Castanea hispida mixed in with the balsam root. It seems like the higher elevation this needs no comment, nor does this. We finally get up to the summit of the Dalles Mountain Road, and it too is sort of its own plant community right there on the top, and considerably different from down below. And the difference is in the wildflowers it has up here. There are these masses of white and pink phlox, along with red thigh buckwheat, and also pink daggerpot. Along with 9-leaf desert parsley or Lomatium tritornatum. There's also what we call the phlox speciosa or showy phlox that is found up here. We're gonna go down the other side of Dalles Mountain and through Golden Dale and on up Highway 97, almost to the Sadis Pass level to Brooks Memorial State Park. It's at the very east edge of our chapter and just below Sadis Pass. There are multiple unofficial cross-country trails starting from the Environmental Learning Center. The elevation there at the Learning Center is 2,600 feet. A state park pass is required. You'll find this flower elsewhere too, but this is the taper tip onion. It has enough of an odor you may know that you're in the area you just by smell. Here we have our white western groundsel. And I'm going to call this one, even though I said it's tough to identify lupins, which it is, but I think this is the broadleaf lupin, maybe. And the key is the leaf tapers out gradually to about its widest, about 2/3 of the way out towards the tip. I don't see this much of any place else besides here at Brooks Memorial. I'll take that back. I have seen that elsewhere too. So why couldn't the botanist plant any flowers? Well, he hadn't bought any. And that pretty much wraps us up. Jack Frost is going to come along pretty soon. Even though it's beautiful and sunny outside and nice and warm today, when Jack Frost gets here, he turns the vine echoes pretty, and he pretty well puts an end to the wildflower season. Thank you very much for being here on this day. Stay well and enjoy the wildflowers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for comments, for questions and comments.